So last week we were talking about what? What did we start talking about last week? Matter, right? Anything that takes up space and has some kind of weight was made of matter, right? We called that mass and volume. We then talked about all the solids, liquids, and gases, right? Solids, how are the atoms in there? They don't move. They're tight. They're packed in there tightly. And because they don't move, that means that solid always what?
Stays the same.
Stays the same shape and same shape and same what? Volume. Thank you. Same shape, same volume. So in other words, it looks the same whether I put it here, I put it in outer space, or I put it in the bottom of the lake. And it will always stay that same shape, and it will always take up that much space no matter where it is. However, we then move to liquids. And a liquid, what happens to the atoms? They move around a little bit, right? And when they move around a little bit, what does that do to its shape? The change of shape based on what? Whatever container it's in, right? So if it's in a weird shaped container, it looks like that shape of the container. However, what happens to the volume? The volume, the space that it's taken up? It's the same space, right? If I have this much liquid here, it's the same if I put it over here in a little tube. If I put it over here in a big, it's the same amount of space. But then we got to the crazy one, which was gas, and gas does what? The atoms bounce everywhere, which means the shape and the volume always does what? Changes according to what? Whatever container it's in. So if it's in this room, it's in the shape of this room, and it takes up the whole space of this room. If we were to compact it all down into a little bottle, it would be the shape of that bottle, and it would be the size of that bottle, okay? Today we're going to take that and we're going to start putting it with mixtures, okay? So if I asked you, what is a mixture? What would be your definition? What would be a 5th grade definition of what a mixture is? Yes, ma'am.
Things put together.
So that's basically what it is. Things put together. Now we're going to say it a little bit better because it's two or more substances that are put together, right? You guys have all made something like some kind of recipe, and you put flour and eggs and milk and sugar, and you put it all together, and then what do you do with it? You mixed it up. That's why it's called a mixture. We stir it up, we mix it up because we're combining the two. So if we're talking about what a mixture is two or more substances that are combined. But they do not form a new substance. In other words, I don't put water and sugar together and I make a tree. Okay, that doesn't happen. I put water and sugar together, it's still sugar water, right? I put salt and water together, it's salt water. It's like the ocean. Okay, we're going to learn later that sometimes you put two things together and it just completely changes into something new. Okay? However, when we mix things together, for example, I can mix a banana. Is that a mixture? A bunch of bananas that are all together? No. Why is that not a mixture? They're the same. Remember, it's two or more substances that are different when we combine together. However, if I were to mix them with, pears and grapes and strawberries and cherries, I've now made a fruit salad, right? That is a mixture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kinds of fruits. I put it together. It is a mixture. However, sometimes we want to separate that mixture. All right, if I had a fruit salad and I said, hey, separate it, how would you separate it? What would you do? You guys have no idea how to separate some fruit salad? What do you mean, what do you mean take it out? What are you doing? Tell me, what are you doing? What do you mean sorting it? Pull it out fruit by fruit with your hands, right? Or a fork or tweezers or something like that. You can physically separate it, right? Pull this. I'm going to pull all the oranges over here and all the bananas over here and that, okay? Anybody, you guys know what I'm talking about? That's the easy way. That's by hand, separating something by hand. However, sometimes it's not that easy to separate things by hand. For example, if I said I want you to separate all of the sugar from the water, can you go in there and pull out all the sugar out of water?
No.
How can you separate it? Or can you? You can't, huh? You just, that's it. You mix it, it's together. Sorry. That's incorrect. You're going to learn today how to separate different mixtures. Okay? The first and the easiest one, by hand. Okay? All of you guys can do that. Sometimes you can separate it by hand. For example, if I have paper clips and I have push pins, little tacks, right? If I were to dump these both into the same bucket, couldn't I separate them? Pull all the push pins over here. That's by hand. That's easy, okay? However, what if I said, look, I can't use my hands because maybe they're poisonous. I don't know. What if I put, oh, these are all paper clips. These paper clips, plastic paper clips and metal paper clips, and I dump them all in there and I say, I need these separated. I could separate each one, but I don't have that much time. What would be the next quickest way? And this is one that you guys probably learned in 4th grade. Hey, can't I just run a magnet over it? What would happen if I took a big strong magnet and put it right over the top of all those? All the metal ones would suck up to the magnet and all the plastic ones would be there and I've got them separated, I'm done, right? Could I do that with the push pins and the paper clips? No, because they're both got magnets. So sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes we can separate it by hand, by color, by shape, by size, right? Because in my room, I have a bunch of big paper clips and a bunch of little paper clips. And I can separate them by the big and the little. I can separate the magnets. If it has metal, I can separate the metal ones away from the other ones. However, in science, there are other ways. Let me show you a few of them. Different ways of separating mixtures. 1, sieving. What does sieving mean? I don't know. I'll tell you what, guys. We don't call it sieving down here in the South. You've all done this and you don't realize it. If I show you this picture. Where have we done this? At the beach, right? You ever go over there, take up a whole bunch of sand and put it on your little strainer thing and you go shh, 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 and then all of a sudden all the sand falls out and what do you have left in there? Shells and shark teeth, right? And then you pick through it and you keep the couple you want and then you do it again, right? This is called sieving, okay? We call it a filter. Not filter, straining. We call it, get the strainer out, right? You guys have seen the little strainers. Your mom has the little metal bowl looking things with holes that you put you guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. That's a strainer. That's what we call it down here in the South. They call it sieving up north, okay? It's the same thing, separating small solids from bigger solids, okay? We also have one we talked about, magnetic separation. And I'm going to tell you right now, they talk about iron filings a lot, okay? Iron filings is like powdered iron, all right? And if we put this powder and this powder together and one of them's iron filings, we can run a magnet over there and it pulls it all up. Have any of you played with that little game that's in like a little plastic box? And it's a guy, he's got a bald head, and at the bottom there's all this black stuff. And you get this little pin that has a magnet on the end, and you can pick up all that metal filings and give him a haircut or a beard with it. You guys don't know what I'm talking about? Oh, some of you do? Okay, that was a game that when we were kids, we didn't have electronics. We had to play with toys like that. I'll have to find one and show you, but that's using iron filings a lot. It's like an iron powder kind of thing. But we can always separate it by using a magnet. Another one is, these kind of go together, flotation. Now there's two parts here. Over the last couple of days, we've had a lot of rain. You've probably gone out into your yard and you see water everywhere. Your yard's flooded, right? But all of a sudden you see some things just floating off down your street. What's usually floating off down the street? Leaves, right? How many of you have seen leaves get separated from all the sticks and rocks in your yard? All of a sudden the water comes in there and what happens? Leaves float, sticks and rocks don't, leaves leave. You just separated it and you didn't realize it. Okay, nature sometimes will separate leaves. You could do it with floating stuff, little pieces of wood. In my yard we have mulch, And anytime it rains, that mulch just starts floating, and I got mulch all over the place now. I got to come in and rake it back in. That's flotation. On the opposite side, and you'll see this a little bit later, there's something at the bottom. Well, at the bottom, this is called, wow, here we go. Flotation and sedimentation. Okay, sedimentation, S like sand. You guys have all been in a swimming pool, and you go swimming and you play, and then at the end of the day, you get out, everything settles. You come back the next day, and you have a bunch of leaves all over the top. And what do you see all over the bottom? Sand, right? You jumped in with dirty feet, and all of a sudden, all that sand eventually sinks. Sedimentation, you'll see later, sedimentation sinks. It goes to the bottom. Flotation floats, sedimentation sinks. So you could separate it that way. If I wanted to separate all the sand and water, all I got to do is let it sit and the sand will sink, and I could suck all the water out of it and the sand will still be there. And another one, finally, is filtration. And the first part of this is called a filter, or using filters to filter it. Filtration. I do this every morning. I use filters every morning to separate solids from a liquid. What do I filter every morning? Coffee. How many of your parents use a coffee filter? That's why they're called a filter. Coffee filter. You put all the grounds in it, right? You run water through it, and what happens? The grounds stay there, but the water goes through. How many of your parents, or we do this a lot, you fry up some chicken or fish or something, right? And then at the end of the day, I take all that oil and I run it through a paper filter. And what happens? What am I filtering? All the liquid drips out of it. All the oil falls through it, right? But what stays in my filter? That leftover crunchy food, crispy parts in there, right? What would happen if I never filtered it and I just kept frying fish and frying chicken and frying everything else? What happens? It would build up, it would burn, it would get gross, it would make your French fries taste bad and things like that. So you have to filter your oil, filter water. That's separating water from solids, okay? So these are your methods of mixing and separating. Quick little quiz here. Actually, let me come back to this one. So if I used a funnel, that's like putting a filter, right? And we talked about magnets, but here's one called boiling or evaporating. This is taking a liquid away from a solid. How many of you have ever been to the beach? You go swimming, you wear your bathing suit. When you're done, you hang it out to dry, and you come back the next day, it's dry, right? All that water has evaporated. It's all turned into a gas and it's gone. But have you ever noticed what's still all over your bathing suit?
Salt.
It's what?
Salt.
Salt. How many of you have ever seen that like white line on your shorts or bathing suit when you're done? That salt's there. Why? Because the water has been evaporated, or sometimes we could do it fast and boil it. We could boil it out, and that salt would still be there. Now, for your notes. Quick review. Mixture. What is a mixture? A mixture is a combination of solids, liquids, and gases, right? I could put solids and solids together, right? Paper clips and tacks, I put it together. Solid and solid. I could put solids and liquids together, right? Sand and water. And then I could separate all that. Can I put liquids and gases together? Really? I do believe you guys all separated liquids from a gas just the other day. You sure did. Where did you get rid of all the gas and the liquid stayed there? Coke and Mentos, right? You put those things in there, and what happened? All the gas escaped, that liquid stayed there. Okay? Soda is a mixture of gas and liquids. So when we're going to separate these, I've got two separate sides, okay? There's four ways to do it. You could separate by size. These are all like what you learned in 4th grade and 3rd grade, right? Take all the big paper clips from the little paper clips. Take all the big nuts away from the little bolts, right? You can do it by shape. How many of you do this? How many of you get a handful of the snack mix and you separate out? I'm going to eat all the pretzels first and then all the big rye pieces. Anybody do that? Or are you guys just animals and you just eat it hand by hand, right? No. I do that. I'll lay on the couch watching TV and put a handful like on my chest, and I'll sit there and I'll eat all these little weird pieces first, and then all the pretzels and the big rye pieces, and I save the Chex Mix. I even separate the Chex Mix. No, I'm the only one? Okay. I do it by color too. I'm weird. I know. Anybody do this? You get a handful of M&Ms and you eat all the red ones first and then all the blue ones. And yeah, I do that all the time. Okay. And then finally, magnetic attraction. We've talked about this. We can separate it, run a magnet, pulls up all the metal. Everything that's not metal stays there, right? This is what you learned in like 4th grade, right? 2nd grade. You probably learned this in kindergarten. And they said, hey, take all the cars and separate them. Separate them by the color, right? Or all the big cars over here and all the little cars over here. You guys did this, right? But in 5th grade, we're going to add to it. So you have these 4, right? Size, shape, color, magnet. For those online, copy this down, pause your video. I'll be right back. Okay, the second part, this is the 5th grade part that you need to really kind of pay attention because you've noticed 5th grade vocabulary is getting tougher. So when you start taking your quizzes and things like that, they're using vocabulary that some of you are not paying attention to, and you're just guessing whatever these words are. Well, if we were doing a science vocabulary lesson like you do in reading, these 4, size, shape, color, and magnet, I would let you circle. You don't have to do a sentence for it. But these, you need to know because these are getting trickier, okay? One is called sieving. We talked about that one. That is, we call it sifting, right? We're going to sift it through the strainer. All right, we call it a straining, sifting, whatever you want to call it. But that's taking sand and shells, right? We separate the big shells away from the little sand using a strainer or a sifter. Similar is a filter or filtration. Filtration is using a filter, like a coffee filter. All right, this is separating solids from liquids. And then the last two, they go together. One is flotation and the other one is sedimentation. That's why I drew this little arrow because they go together. If you pour water in there, certain things will either float or it will sink. And that's a way you could separate it. If it floats, like wood in water, that is flotation. You can separate all the wood. If it sinks, it's called sedimentation, like the sand in the water. The water will be there, all the sand will go to the bottom, okay? These are your 5th grade vocabulary words that you will need to know. Make sure you copy these down. If you have any questions, now's the time.